of any changes to the agenda?
No.
Move it.
Moved by Lossner, supported by Rogers. Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. You have in front of you one set of minutes. One set of minutes.
Oh, you didn't bring the closed session in? Oh, to hand out.
Okay, that's
You
what
did.
Hold on, we got closed session minutes also. That's fine. Thought we had one. Shall I read it out loud?
No. No.
Just joking.
Support.
Before Blake reads them.
I gotta read them here. Questions or comments?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay. I don't know why I signed these. I think you throw them away. All right. This is the first of two opportunities for limited public comment. Any member of the public may speak. Another opportunity at the end of the meeting. We're going to start with Human Resources. Mr. Dawson, positions update, page 5.
Testing, testing. All right. Good morning, everybody. Got a lot under human resources today, so I appreciate your patience as you bear through this. So I want to do some departmental highlights, but I'll start with the general overview. We filled 9 positions this month. We have 20 positions posted, with 6 of those being ongoing requisitions between the Sheriff's Office, Youth Facility, and seasonal hiring at the Parks Department. There are 10 positions that we're going to be recommending today due to people being promoted, resigning, or retiring. I'd note that the Chief Deputy in the Treasurer's Office is going to be retiring at the end of this month. And I would also note that we have a new judge that will be taking a new judge vacancy. And one of the things I'll say while I talk about that is we've had so many judges that there's been a high turnover in judicial assistants, which has created a lot of pressure for the trial courts. And so there was a reclass in our Ways and Means packet last month, and just wanted to note part of that is pressure being put on the judicial assistant of the chief judge and taking on additional responsibility with so much turnover within that arena. So for the prosecutor's office, we're having significant retention recruitment problems with attorneys in the prosecutor's office. Discussed this last month, but public safety, it's important to remember, encompasses the full life cycle of a reported crime. So not just the arrest and jailing, but also the process the prosecutor's office goes through when they evaluate a case and ensure defendants are treated fairly and victims get their day in court. Prosecutor's office has to assemble law enforcement records, evaluate cases, and attorneys have left to become a judge, parole board member, 3 to the AG's office, 2 to another county. And these departures have been for higher wages, less caseloads, workloads. And currently, this structure we have at the county is just not meeting that group. We took a stab at it last year around this time, but just reporting that we're still struggling. And that also bleeds into the public defender's office as well, so attorneys in general. I'll mention Prosecutor Lloyd was successful in securing some direct funding for his office through the state budget process, and I know he's evaluating ways that that funding could help him bolster retention recruitment in his office to help lower the number of open cases within Eaton County. So I imagine that will be a discussion in the future, but that's something he worked hard on trying to take care of his team. For the Sheriff's Department, corrections, we have 2 correction deputy openings. They're currently working to fill those vacancies. The 2 openings for the jail EMT are still ongoing. Same difficulties with finding qualified candidates for those roles as we previously reported on. Road patrol update, there are currently 10 deputy vacancies in the patrol division. with 5 deputies in field training, that those should end a combination between October and November of later this year. Future outlook, above and beyond what we've talked about, we know we have 4 members of Road Patrol who will be eligible for retirement this year, and at present, we estimate that they will take their retirements shortly after they qualify. Law enforcement marketplace, as we've talked about, and why we went into early bargaining, it's just difficult to recruit for law enforcement agencies across the state and the country. We definitely, good news, made a big improvement in this options that were available for them in that recruitment, and it's paid off as I go through the pipeline of candidates we have. But we'll still continue to evaluate how these changes impact retention within the first 3 years of service. So the pipeline, we have 1 sponsorship candidate in the Washtenaw Academy who should graduate in September. Then they would be an FTO until January or February of sometime in 2025. We have another 2 sponsorship candidates that will be entering Kellogg Community College's Academy starting August 5th. If successful, they would graduate mid-December, complete FTO in April or May of 2025. And we have another 7 sponsorship candidates scheduled to enter the Lansing Community College Academy beginning August 19th. If successful, they would complete their FTO sometime in also April and May of 2025. So as your main recruiting platform being people that aren't previously MCOL certified, there's a long delay between finding your qualified candidates and then getting them to a place where they can patrol on their own. So we have 3 additional candidates that are in the hiring process and being evaluated possibly for future academy update opportunities, but the Sheriff's Office is evaluating those. In summary, we're down 10 for Road Patrol Division with 5 in FTO. So Sheriff's Office is working from the perspective that they're down 15 spots when it comes to being able to provide coverage and meet the demand for public safety for patrol coverage. The number can prove to be higher if you consider anyone out on an approved leave, like a vacation or medical leave or assignment at courthouse security. That's the update for positions.
Someone want to move the positions? Latzenheiser Rogers. Questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Okay. Got in front of you the MERS annual evaluation. Good reading. Complicated, but you know, it's good to look at the numbers, and we're bottom line for the pensions, we're 61% supposedly. 61% there. 60% is the naughty cutoff. So
It's also the cutoff for aid if the state does a package, but yep.
and I was surprised, really, if this was a new addition to this packet or this report, but it did historical. It showed what our percentages were over the last decade or two. And I guess what surprised me is how widely it fluctuated. Even at my time on the board, I guess I wasn't keeping track of how that percentage changed so much over the year to year.
No, that's the way the,
Was that new? Was that new this year, you
I
think?
don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
Yep.
No, but that's telling us what happens each year after they do their valuation, and they go through the whole process of determining what your assumptions are and what our investment earnings were. So, and then that doesn't hit us until 2 years after.
Right.
So it fluctuates in those benefits.
Right.
So we don't see a savings in retirement contributions for the reductions that we've made to the multiplier, usually for at least probably 4 to 5 years. The earliest would be 2 years.
Well, and that's part of the trade-off for them using the smoothing, you know, rather than
Correct.
having these gigantic ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
They smooth over time, and by smoothing it, it just takes all the, say, the market gyrations out of it. Because, you know, one year the market is up 10%, and the next year it's down 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't like to see the actual mark-to-market
Right.
pricing.
Did you want to go through stuff? I know Joe wants to talk.
Yep, I know he does.
I can just do quick highlights. We went down the 1% as noted, which was the same thing that happened in the prior valuation period as well. We made all of our required contributions plus an additional almost 45,000. Main factors would be changes of benefits, actuarial assumptions and methods, and then overall investment experience. As we talked about with the smoothing, our actual return was 10.94, but with the smoothing process, it was 5.54. So the earnings that we're not fully recognizing today should, as Connie said, over the next 2 years, start getting recognized. I kind of expected we'd have some level of investment difficulty just because of interest rates skyrocketing the way they did. So anybody that was holding bonds at a lower rate, you have to sell it at a discount, and so you take a hit on it. But if you're trading it out into set bonds at a much higher rate, then that hopefully will translate to better earnings in the future for MERS, but that just depends on their strategy with how they invest. Something they go over at the MERS conference, and it's usually pretty insightful. But based on these current projections, and note the contributions required in this report are what are going to be used, not this budget, but the next budget. So the current budget you're working on is going to be based on the valuation from 2022. 2023 will be for next fiscal year. We did an estimate for our estimated property tax value for this budget cycle, and the required contribution from the 22 report is equal to 32.5% of our total general operating revenue that we get. So the tax allocation process that you guys all went through of the funds that we currently get from that rate that was set in 1978, almost 33% just goes off the top for these. So just a helpful perspective. And we're supposed to be fully funded by 2038, so we would expect that ratio to continue to grow year over year.
Okay, any questions about that? Painful numbers.
Just mention that we met.
Yeah. We did meet with two state legislators, Senator, we met with Angela, we met with Whitwer, and let them know kind of the circumstances and did a presentation on the long-term effects of this. On a call last night with different administrators all across the state of Michigan, we brought this up, and there were some counties that were interested in engaging with us and having these discussions with the state, because we're not the only community going through this. One of the points that we made was if you set up a mechanism that chokes off too much funding, it puts counties and other municipalities in a position to have to cut services that aren't mandated. And there's a limit on what services you can cut because quite a few of them are all mandated by the state of Michigan. So inadvertently, if your goal was to fully fund pensions, you created a situation where you're going to end up forcing dramatic change. Isabella County had to lay off most of their road patrol, and I know there are a lot of communities that are having to do some tough math, and I can't help but imagine that these annual evaluations for MERS are playing a role in those discussions. So.
Okay. Yes, Brian.
Did I hear someone say yesterday that we might have a representative from MERS speak to us in the near future?
Yes, you did.
Why, yes.
That will be in August. We'll have our representative come to speak at the Ways and Means Committee meeting. And then if the board, if we want to have another representative come at the board meeting, she was not available for the actual board meeting, we can have someone else come, but Ways and Means may suffice.
Who's our rep these days?
Marnie Daggett.
Same as, okay. So she's been around, knows our situation.
Yes. She knows Jill very well, too.
It should be fun.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, and just in terms of easing some of that problem, if the state were to say, rather than be fully funded at that end date, if they pushed it out 5 more years, it would change things. You know, it doesn't seem like it would, but it would make some pretty big differences.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it would just gives you a little longer to catch up, so.
Yeah, if if it looked like something where if a community makes a benefit cut, they get to add years. If you make a like a 1% additional contribution above what you needed, like, there could be ways to incentivize communities and to reward communities that have made the tough decisions to try to shore up their pensions. So then that way,
Currently, that doesn't go that way.
it's just 2038 for everybody.
And so what, by us changing our multipliers and putting them lower, it made an effect on our contribution, but it isn't immediate. It's way down the road. And if they would take that into consideration and then extend the drop dead date.
Yeah. And I did have a discussion with Marnie, and she said that once people get funded at a higher rate, once communities get funded at a higher ratio, sometimes they can lock in a longer-term repayment schedule, but we're at 61%. And not that it's a set rate, but if you have to wait till you get to 80 to 90% to like make that kind of determination, we're a ways off from that. Our tough decisions are a lot closer than us getting to hold out until we get to that funding level. So we'll continue having those discussions with them, and then hopefully we can try to engage the governor's office to figure out what's needed.
Okay. I think Joe is first.
Well, I don't have a lot to say. I just would point to, I believe it's page 23 of their report. And it indicates the last line of that graph is the valuation asset balance. And it starts in 2013 and goes through 2023. And every year, it's gone up. They continue to have additional monies more than what they're spending. Now, it's been a little lean there, didn't go up much. I think in 2020 from 2020 to 2019. But, we keep talking about this being a problem, and it's a problem because we're being forced to go to 100% funding when I think that that's just not necessary. And quite frankly, it's going to bankrupt. I mean, you can talk about talking to legislators and senators and the governor or whatever. They did this to the post office. Post office makes money. Post office is losing its shirt because of this sort of thing. And shortly after the geniuses in Washington decided to do that to the post office, all of a sudden we decided to do it here in Michigan. And it's totally unnecessary.
Well, you're right, because it's ongoing. And one that's different is our OPEB. That's a different story entirely. Now that, we've reached the tipping point and now we're contributing. And, we're at the point now where we're paying for that. But that has a closed class. And so the difference is, in the past, the employees were contributing. Now, there's only a couple of them left that are contributing. And suddenly, that's a whole different story now. That you can also see how that grows in this, I don't know, this report or the next report. It's kind of the next report, but.
Well, you're absolutely right, and I have great regret that I was a part of that. I think I voted against doing it. But, we were assured by the experts that that was the thing to do, and nobody at that time, in the discussions that I recall, ever said, you know what, you close this class, you're putting a noose around your neck because you're not going to have people contributing to it, but you are going to be contributing to it. It was sold to us as the way to make that put that on solid financial footing for the future. And it's probably the greatest regret of my career here is that we did that, quite frankly, because that was just, financially, it has turned out to be a albatross.
Right.
And it has not accomplished anything that we thought it was supposedly going to accomplish.
Yep. It's probably been one of the more difficult, in my career at the county, that's been a very difficult area. And, we can look back and have all kinds of stories, but boy, that's been a troublesome one. Jeannie?
Okay, yep, I was here when we took that vote on the OPEBs, and it was told to us that way, as well as the auditors were delighted that we had done that. So, yeah. Anyway, I'll just back and Joe up. But the other part that I had a question was, Ben, when we talk about retention and recruitment, okay? So when we look at these balances that are in our mayor's fund, when people leave here and do not do their 25 years, typically they're going to be leaving, maybe they even have their pension secured with the 10 years, but it's not going to be at the higher pay grades because they haven't worked their way up the ladder. Is not that sometime in the future going to also depend on what they're going to be charging us for? Am I making sense to you?
You are, and you're correct. And part of this evaluation includes, so if an employee leaves here, even if they don't make the 10 years, unless they take a refund on their employee contributions, they're considered a liability that the county carries. So someone could do 6 years here, leave, go to another community, say like Portland PD, and if they get 4 years of service there, it's reciprocal, so they'll be able to come back for their 6 years with us. But to your point, their FAC is based on the earnings when they were with us, not whatever earnings they got with their new employer. So for that, it's kind of like a fixed calculation because we know what they earned and we know how long they were here. But you're correct, yeah.
So we might even be in some time in the future, be able to put that as something that can lesser our obligation, like when we lowered the multiplier. I mean, it can all come out in the wash maybe at some point?
That's a difficult one to predict, though, because again, going back to what Ben said, it's dependent on if they don't take their funds out, then they're going to potentially draw a pension. So we have people leave with 10 years, but they're not age eligible. But when they're age eligible at 60, they'll go ahead and draw it. So a lot of times we don't have that. The actuaries put that within their valuation, those assumptions, and every terminated benefit. So anyone who's left here, they factor the dollar amount with the FAC that they had when they were working here. And then that's put in basically as the calculation for that person. So they can identify a flat dollar amount for that individual unless they had a COLA or something at that time as a benefit. So it's not really going to change anything in the future, but the more people that leave and draw out their contributions, those are, yes. So if you look on the flow of assets chart, you'll see that each year from 2013 to 2023, the assets, again, this is only the employee share, that are drawn out are generally less than 200,000 a year on average.
Yeah, and just structurally, in some ways, it's, you know, structurally, we may have been able to do some better things than what we had in the past. And one of the things I always point at is you look at the working deputy go to supervisory category. You know, you work for 15 years or 20 years as a deputy, then you bump up into the next category. And, you know, you made your contributions for the previous 20 years, you're in the next category, and now you have a much higher FAC. And it shows a disparity, and the disparity is just the way we structure it, you know, by the employee, you know, they're just getting a promotion, but they go into a new group that isn't funded because no one's in that group long enough to fund it. And yet the take out of that group is always better than what the previous was because you've got a higher FAC. So it's kind of
Correct.
the structure of the whole process is going against us in some ways.
Correct. You could go from a benefit of a 1.7% multiplier, and you could be in that for 25 years. move over to a department that in the past we had a 3.2 multiplier, they would receive the benefit in the last 3 years or 5 years that they worked at that 3.2% multiplier. So that creates an issue within our valuation process. They really can't predict that. They should assume in this that every person who leaves the sheriff non-supervisory group and enters into the command group, that is a high cost, right? But we haven't been contributing on the basis of that higher benefit. That means they come in, they're definitely gonna retire. You generally don't have that. Everyone who leaves is going to draw a retirement out of that group. So you'll note in the valuation that the cost of that pension benefit is for the next year, 2025, it's going to be 140%.
Right.
So it's just, that's the way it goes. That's,
And, to understand that the multiplier isn't that today, but that multiplier affects all of our retirees who are receiving that previous multiplier, and it's not something that goes away, even though we've fixed the problem, or it doesn't really change the long-term direction until 20 years from now.
Yeah.
So,
That would be where the demographic effects would be, the long run as the payments going
You
out.
won't be around anymore? The graphic effect.
I don't know, you could still be here.
I might still be here, but some of the rest of you might be in trouble. I don't know.
yeah, on page 12, you see what the rates are that the county contributes. So you can do, MERS allows what's called a phase-in, so we could pay less to phase in our benefit. You can see with the command group, the one I mentioned, 140%. If we phased it in, if we use the no phase-in, it's 140. If we use the phase-in, which we've been doing to pay the higher amount, it's 145. So it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to pay a less amount when we already know that benefit cost is going to be there based on their valuation and the assumptions going forward. So, but, if you look at that and the amount the county pays, when we're talking about the benefits that those employees are getting today versus what they were getting before, so general employees 2.5, they were receiving, now down to 2, and then 3.2 down to 2. Looking out into the future, it is going to be better, but we're not going to see that reduction in those costs. Like I said, 2 years is conservative. We'll see some, but in 5 years, we should see the impact of that. And that goes back to Ben's demographics, depending on how that happens.
Okay. Yes, Jeannie?
Connie, would it do anything if we do right now it's the highest 3 years? If we went to the highest 5 years, because that might take care of some of the higher multiplier that we have to pay on, like if they do the 3.2.
You could do that. So two groups are at the 5-year,
Okay.
and the remaining groups are at the 3-year, but I don't think that's gonna have as large of an impact as you would, assume it would have. And we would have to bargain that. And at this point where we are in the game doing that, my opinion, again, doesn't seem beneficial, and it does, that little bit that it's going to cost is not going to impact the county as much as it will the employee.
Okay. I was just thinking of that situation with going from the 1.7 to the 3.2, and if they didn't want to spend 5 years, for the higher.
You would have an impact there,
Okay, that's what I was
but
trying to remember.
that's not something that would happen today, though. We took care of that by not having the 3.2% multiplier. There were times that I considered making a deal with the sheriff because there was a 25 and out, so when I had 25 years, if the sheriff would just take me in under his wing, and I would only have to work for 30 days, and I could have left. But that didn't happen, I've stayed. For 36, so, yeah.
Well, and those are all the moving parts, you know,
Yeah.
of the pension liability, and those of us that looked at it for a while, we understand how the FAC affects everything, and each of these moving parts creates the ultimate liability.
Right.
And the most critical part of all of it is that it's so long-term, you know,
Correct.
everything is stretched into the future, 20 years. So every change you make doesn't have a lot of immediate effect.
Joe had a comment.
Yes, Joe?
Well, one of the things I've wondered over the years is how much this would all change if we didn't have so many theoretically independent groups. I mean, if you look at the breakdown for the different groups that we have, I mean, some are well-funded, others are theoretically not well-funded. Some, there's a great deal of money that's gained by investments. Some, it's like $200. And, you know, I understand that that's a result of bargaining units and that, but, you know, we've got some very small groups, and that because of their size, they're expensive. And so I've often wondered if we could have had essentially a county retirement system, and it was all one group, how much these figures would change.
Yeah. You know, labor law doesn't allow that. You know, we pretty much, as the employer, look at what would be the best option for everybody, but labor law allows that each unit can decide their own course, and that's kind of the result of it.
Well, it's possible that, you know, in the future that, I certainly think that all of the representatives of the various unions could sit at the same table with the employer and negotiate a plan that would cover all of the employees. I mean, there's a way to do it if we wanted to do it.
And, you know, we as a county have been cognizant of that, and we've tried to keep everyone on the same field when it comes to wages, when it comes to benefits. And I think that's to our credit. You know, we don't have a lot of disparity among the different groups here at the county. When you work in the county, you pretty much get the same thing, whether you're represented or not represented, or, you know, not exactly, but over the large picture, everyone sort of gets the same amount of benefit, which is,
I agree with you, Blake. We've tried very hard to be consistent with all of the employees, but the way MERS breaks it down and you look at all these various figures, that's my point, is that the way they show it, I think that there's a financial liability that accrues ultimately to the county because we theoretically have these independent groups that, you know, each one, some are well-funded, some are supposedly not well-funded.
yeah, and I was looking at some of those small groups, and in some of them, there are more retirees than there are people in the group, and yet the people in the group are essentially paying freight for the whole bunch, and it's just
Yeah, so
set up.
our efforts to be consistent with all of our employees are in some effects in terms of the financial ramifications are defeated by separating these all out and showing them in different fashions, and so, you know.
Yep.
To Commissioner Brailer's point, Melissa and I we had a discussion yesterday in relationship to, you know, combining groups. And there are only two groups that we could combine at this point, and that is the 01 non-union group and the 10 admin staff. That change was the result back in like 1996 or so to
And I was here.
yeah, to improve a benefit for the administrative staff. And then the non-administrative staff asked for the same benefit, voted, and was granted that benefit. But at that point, those groups had already been separated. And we could have combined them, but there was a different rate factor for the employees. That is something that Melissa and I talked about and believe that we should look at that into the future when we can, when we're more stable. it doesn't make sense to do it today. It's not going to have that large of a cost savings, but it does spread it more across the board for the employer share.
Right.
Yeah.
The larger the group, the more the costs are spread, and the more the costs are spread and the savings are spread.
And it's cost between granting agencies because it is based on that cost. So there would be a savings there. So, it's something that we're looking at, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions about this? We've kind of lapsed over also into the OPEB, but Ben?
Yeah, I wanted to tack on a Medicare Advantage update with the retirees' health valuation. So let you all know, we officially went through our initial enrollment window. This means nearly all of our retirees who qualify for the benefit have successfully enrolled in the new plan as of July 1st and are currently receiving treatments and medications under the new coverage. Always glitches to get worked out with that stuff, but Blue Cross Blue Shield and Brown have been working very close with Andrea to resolve anything that comes up. Only 2 members of this group we've struggled to get contact or struggled to get through the initial enrollment, but we're working directly to get them through even though the initial deadline was missed, so doing kind of a special enrollment.
To note on those individuals, the 2 are not currently using the coverage but are enrolled. So they probably have a benefit elsewhere. So when looking at the claims data for those 2, am I correct? They were not actually using the benefit. So it could have been, it just depends on.
We're
yeah.
probably their secondary
Yeah.
coverage, likely, yeah. And
So how many, you asked the question, did you get the answer? How many retirees are do we have currently on our plan? Non-employees?
I'm looking to Melissa because I don't have it in front of me, but I know current active employees is 61. We have 2 retirees coming up, so it'll go down to 59.
And I'm thinking like 120, but am I way off?
Current active lives that are on our retirees' health, I have the numbers as of March, so I apologize that they're not 100% updated. But that's 235 lives covered.
Okay. Okay.
Related to the evaluation an evaluation of assets that gets an evaluation report. So it came in having us funded at 71.7, which was even an improvement from our initial valuation we had run after we switched over to the Medicare Advantage. So this is different than valuations you've had in the past when we were funding it ourselves. We're now on a premium based. So what that means is that funded ratio is very sensitive to the premium rate that we're going to pay. So 71.7 is a great figure, but no, we locked in a 30-month contract with our Medicare Advantage. So it means we're going to have fixed costs until January of 27. When that goes to renew, if the premiums go up, say 15% over that period of time, then that ratio will come down at that time once that is done. So I looked into it, around 5 to 10% rate increases this year for a lot of communities that are having to renew this cycle. So doesn't necessarily actionable today, but just know that 71% is probably a soft number. So I would probably expect maybe a 15 to 18% shift when we go to renew a couple years from now. But way better than the 32% it was prior to us changing how we buy that insurance. So I think that was still a great decision that the board made.
And we're within just a stone's throw of having pretty much all of our employees on that program. I mean,
Yeah, and our goal at this point is try to get as much money into that nest egg responsibly as we can, because once the last active employee retires, there will no longer be active contributions to that benefit, unless this body chooses to continue to contribute beyond that. But so, yeah.
okay, any more questions about the OPEB valuation? Let's move on to, oh yeah, Brian?
I don't know if this is specifically OPEB evaluation, but my question would be if we are unable to scare up any more funding for the county and we end up laying off or letting go employees, how do these numbers change for us? do we then, by reduction of our workforce, do we get a reduction in payment to these things, or we still have to maintain that?
So we would, if related to the pension benefit, you would still have to maintain that because you have to pay into it on the basis of what the calculation is for those that would draw it. So you're probably going to have a fixed amount that is going to stay solid for a longer period of time to pay those benefits. In relationship to the retirees' health, you're not going to have that because the 61 employees that remain, that are currently active, are not going to be the people that potentially you would lay off if it comes to that, because they're senior employees, right? They've been here since at least before 2007. So you're not going to find that benefit. You're still going to have to continue paying the actual cost of the insurance for employees, past employees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in relation to MERS, it reminds me of when my insurance man, sorry, Brian, came to me and said, universal life is outstanding policy. You must buy into that. And here we are at the top of that arc.
Early 80s?
Yeah, coming down,
Sorry.
we're paying through the nose.
80s? Wow. I was born in the 80s.
So- And MERS
Weren't
is,
selling.
MERS is the only one that's benefiting from our money, and that just ticks me off to no end. So I gotta align myself with Joe on this. I know he hates to hear the sound of that, but
Yeah, I'll take allies anywhere I can get.
I would love to have some of our state representatives in here when MERS comes in to meet with us in August, so we can have a real discussion about what's going on with MERS.
Well, and that just, what you've done is highlighted the situation that some of our legislative predecessors have created the situation that we're in today. Quite honestly, the entire precedents were set and contracts were drawn up before we are actually involved at all, right, Brian? Policies were sold that you're still responsible for before you were born.
Well, just the whole idea. I mean, we were one of the better funded counties at the beginning of my career, and then all of a sudden we're right around the
Hey, Joe, not all of a sudden.
Mendoza line. Well, no, what I'm saying is this whole thing changed when they decided that instead of being 70-odd% funded, going along paying the $500,000, $600,000 a year for this, that we somehow had to become fully funded for the quote-unquote unfunded liability. And that's what changed it. And this whole idea that we have to pay extra till 2038, and that extra is $4.55 million. And then the promise, which I think is illusory and have always thought was illusory, is that come 2038, we will be free. And our payments will be around the $500,000 to $600,000 or $700,000, and we'll have $3.5, $4 million that we didn't have available to us. I don't think that's going to happen. I think by the time, I won't be here, but by the time 2038 rolls around, MERS will find a reason why we will continue, this county will continue to be making $4, $5, $6 million payments. And that's, to me, that's the crux of the whole problem. We've had so much debate about, the viability of pensions, whether we should do that, how we should do that. And it's all come about, quite frankly, because there was a push, came from the state, wherever it came from, to all of a sudden identify unfunded liabilities and go ahead and close that so-called gap. There are some communities that didn't pay on a regular basis. They cheated it. They used the money for something else. We were never one of them. We were never one of them. We paid for everything MERS has ever asked us to pay. And for us to be in that situation, it's either very poor planning by them, or you have to take a look around and say, well, what changed? Because this whole idea about, estimating the number of lives and how much it's going to cost and all of that these people are supposedly put into all this was happening in the 80s and the 90s, theoretically. Okay? So I wasn't going to.
Okay, You did, though.
But I did. I did. Well,
All right, we have Jeannie and Andrea, our delegates to the MERS convention. Someone want to move it? Terrence? Brian? Oh, one of the Brians. Questions or comments? This goes on to the full board. All in favor?
Aye.
Is that okay?
No, that's right.
You're going to say something?
Well, I'll just note that the employee delegate that was elected by the employee population is Nolan Brown from Central Dispatch. And then our payroll specialist will be going to
Jennifer.
as well, yes.
Okay. Good.
Congratulations, Jeannie.
No,
Grand
it's Wells.
Rapids.
Grand Rapids this year.
That's not cool.
All right, additional reclassification request. We've got something here, special reclassification at the treasurer's office.
Since we had so much fun with this discussion last Ways and Means, no, I thought we'd bring it back. No, so we received one additional request, Treasurer Robinson, based on discussions I've had with him previously as part of an overall review of positions, operations, and structures within his office. He's doing leading up to this. We were hoping he could be a part of last month's discussions, but we want nonetheless to pass it over to you all. He'd like to be included in this round of reclassification. So this would be authorizing us to add him to the 7 you authorized last month. It's about $500 per evaluation, and it would be to evaluate the position changes that have happened in that particular role. It does a lot of coordinating work with land bank reporting at, I think, state and federal level. So those are some of the skills and duties that he would like to have evaluated.
Well, so my confusion here is, so it's the deputy treasurer and
The position is a deputy treasurer, so they have deputy treasurers 1 and 2.
Oh.
This position deals
I
with
saw a deputy,
foreclosure.
yes, the deputy
It's not
treasurer
the
is retiring.
chief deputy. That is a designation that the treasurer makes for an employee that,
Everybody in the office is a deputy?
yeah, they're all deputy clerks, deputy treasurers, yeah,
Okay. That's my confusion.
yes,
what do you need from us? To just go ahead and approve the request?
yes.
Put it to do the study for $500 essentially?
So moved.
Moved.
Support.
Okay. Moved by Augustine, supported by Railer, or vice versa.
That works. I don't care.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I just have a brief update for labor. I wanted to let you all know, we held our first bargaining meeting with POAM representing the non-supervisory group at Central Dispatch. Very promising opening discussions. We've scheduled a bargaining date with CCLP, which represents Animal Control Group at the Sheriff's Office, so we've got a date scheduled for them. We received an intent to bargain letter from the command group representing the supervisory members at Central Dispatch, and we're in the process of preparing to reach out to custodial and maintenance, the operators union there. So we do have 4 contracts that are out there. Those all technically expire September 30th, so just, you know, as we always say, the limit on staff time, just know that staff will be coordinating a lot of meetings, a lot of bargaining proposals, and so expect some closed sessions over the next couple of months as we try to finish up those agreements, which in a lot of ways do a lot for the budget process too, because it helps you in having a better idea what your expenses are going to be related to personnel, so.
It finalizes the number that we put into the budget for upcoming years, that, to go through the bargaining, once it's been essentially nailed down.
Yeah. So we're off to the races.
Okay. Complete your report, is that it?
Yeah, I think so, unless there's any questions.
Melissa?
So I will start with the audit corrective action plan update. So this past month, we've spent significant time preparing our fiscal year end projections for you. They'll be discussed in greater detail later on in my reports. But this projection gave an opportunity for our office to review all of our accounts and make sure that there's not any transactions that are glaringly obvious that need to be adjusted. It also gave us a chance to compare our budgets and make sure that there's no additional budget amendments, which, as you can see later on in our reports, there are quite a few budget amendments that needed to happen.
I guess that's my question. I saw the budget amendments, and is that pretty much sort of part of this process?
Yes, it is. It's because I've done the fiscal year-end projections and noticed that there were some changes in a lot of smaller departments. Health insurance was a big change. There were some employee turnover as well. So the projections provided that opportunity, so.
Okay, good.
So then moving on to my health insurance reports. You can see this month our health insurance claims were significant. They were $900,000. So again, we are experiencing significant claims. We did receive our quarterly settlement for the first quarter of the calendar year, and that was, I had estimated it'd be between 150 and 225. We actually received 265,000. Yes, Joe?
Do we know why we're having such a substantial increase in claims? Is it because more people are using it? Do we have some
Yes.
people whose situation is significant that it's a sizable financial drain?
Yes, we
all
are
of the above?
experiencing. Yes, and we are also experiencing significant claims on our prescription costs. So both of those factors are high. We did actually receive this month a very substantial stop-loss coverage. That was $317,000 this month, compared to very small prior months, so.
That means that your claims hit that higher level.
Yes.
Well, I know, surgery can run into six figures pretty quickly.
Correct.
And so I wondered if we had a couple of people that were significantly using this benefit because unfortunately their health wasn't very good. Or, because for a very long time, our claims were basically stayed somewhere around the same. They were constant. And now we seem to have a significant increase in that, and I wondered if it meant that there were more people using it than had been using it priorly, or if we had some, for want of a better phrase, big-ticket items coming through that were, I know, and this is 20-odd years ago, when my brother had his heart valve replaced, it was substantially six figures that it all wound up with. And, that's a huge drain.
It's not just one singular person using coverage, it's multiple coverages. So we're experiencing higher claims, so it's unfortunate. But we offer very good coverage, and that's a benefit to our employees, so. I did also include our retirees' health insurance information on this report where I haven't previously. I wanted to include that because of the valuation that was also provided. So that way you have a cost comparison for what we've done so far this calendar year. So are there any questions on my health insurance reports?
It'd be interesting to see what, going back 10 years, maybe I'll do this, it's in our packet, what the prescription drug coverage amount was. And to me, that's like the biggest, that is a big chunk of our payment. It's almost, it's very significant. And I never remember that being such a large chunk of what we're paying out on a monthly.
It's huge. You have some drugs that are it's life-saving treatments that range for county cost, $8,000 a month. So it is significant now. The cost of prescriptions has gone way up.
Do it, Terrence, go back in that packet and.
How'd you know that's what I was?
Because I'm looking at you. We've had our online packets now for 10 or so years, and I find it convenient sometimes to scroll back on memory lane and see what stuff was
Yeah.
a long time ago.
For next month, we could put that into a
Well-
summary document if you'd like.
No, Terrence is gonna
Melissa
tell
would
me
love to do that.
All right.
And I thought I just mentioned, but the FTC is suing the middlemen over the insulin drug pricing. So I know that was a discussion at one of our board meetings. So it looks like the federal government's taking point on doing a suit on that. But to your point about prescription drugs in general, it's really a national issue.
And any money from that lawsuit would go directly into the self-insurance fund, so.
Keep in mind that healthcare, the health industry, whatever you want to call it, is about 18 to 20% of GDP. I mean, it's a huge cost. And, you know, they've talked about reining in costs of healthcare for, I don't know, a long time, and they've made some what appear to have been ultimately futile efforts at it occasionally. But, you know, until we rein in prescription costs, period, you'll never get a handle on healthcare. I mean, it's just, it's a huge part of our economy, and there are a lot of people that are making an awful lot of money.
When I look at the chart on page 111, it shows it's a bar chart that Melissa made, and it shows the health department. Now, the health department they're on our plan, but they make all their own payments, okay? We don't subsidize them at all. So, you know, so we're not, just put that right up front. But their drug payments as a percentage of the whole are much smaller than ours. They might have a different,
They do have a lot less employees covered, obviously.
and they have,
Yeah,
78.
Well, keep in mind,
but it's proportional, you know?
keep in mind, Blake, they had a huge turnover during the COVID. And so
Yeah.
their staff is a lot younger now, and I think that might have something.
They have a lot of young people.
and depending on the number of dependents that they have. So, you know, we have employees who have 5 dependents or more, potentially, so,
Yeah, that would skew it.
yeah.
Okay.
I remember when we brought the healthcare of the health department into our group, and that was a lot because of the way Commissioner Brayler looked at the situation, because their group was so small that we were taking 25 and 28% increases on the policies back then. It wasn't sustainable.
But again, they pay all of that, so.
Yes, they pay all.
We as the county don't cover any of those expenses, so. Okay. Yes, Terrence?
So and this is just a point in time comparison, right? So, but back in 2016, which would have been numbers for 2015, we're looking at around, at 15 and 14, we're around 30 to 35,000 per month. So compare that to this year, you know, we're looking at, what, 80? I think I saw like 80s. I'd have to go back to it, but, so there's a substantial increase, obviously, over the last 8 years.
Good. Need to be aware of it. Okay, Melissa?
All right, so the next report is our child care fund report. And there have not been any substantial or significant changes on that.
Okay.
So if I'm okay to move on, I'm going to move on to our fiscal year end projection. Like I said, this report, while it's only 4 pages, took up a significant amount of our time and energy to make sure that these were accurate, but conservative, realistic. So there's a couple of things that I would like to point out. Our tax revenue shows that that we're not going to spend, or not going to receive 100% of our tax revenue for the Register of Deeds office. We will actually receive additional revenue for property taxes, but in discussing this with the department, Register of Deeds said that there's been a significant reduction in their property recordings due to high interest rates on mortgages, and then also compounded by the county having lack of housing that's affordable, less properties on the market, that sort of thing. So that has impacted their tax revenue as well. So our charges for services revenues are also significantly down. That is due to court revenue, and we discussed that with the department as well. And it's changes in our judicial philosophies, as well as changes that have been mandated by the state level at the direction of SCAO. So those are changes that are going to continue to impact our budgets for future years. Our interest revenues, you can see those are significantly higher than we anticipated. That's because of increased interest rates at the federal level. And also due to changes that the Treasurer's Office have made, they've leveraged funds very well, so. Are there any questions on revenues? Just a couple of points on our expenses side. We will have savings across the board from personnel, approximately 5%, which amounts to about $1.7 million. And that's due to unfilled positions and employee turnover. Are there any questions at this point?
Are you done going through the document?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I was waiting for you to finish. Well, I'm just curious, just looking at the number, I mean, unless I'm reading this wrong, I mean, you look at the bottom and the change in the fund balance. Is this projection that says year-to-date projection now shows that we're not using the fund balance, correct?
Correct. Part of that is because we did experience higher, the savings, budgetary savings from expenses, but also higher revenue from the tax revenue, or from the interest revenue.
And this says, the top of the column says year-to-date projected. Is that the fiscal year-to-date through?
So that's fiscal year-to-date through June 30.
Okay.
Plus a projection through the remainder of the fiscal year.
So it's not really a year-to-date projection, it's a projection for the entire fiscal year?
Correct.
Okay, that was my confusion. I was wondering.
Sorry.
I assumed that was the case just by looking at the numbers. I figured if we're in that position now. Okay, good. So that's, I mean, all in all is positive news as far as the use of the fund balance for this year. Of
Correct.
course, that's, buttressed by what, $3 million in ARPA funds?
Correct.
That's why it's positive. So, okay, thank you.
If there are no further questions on these reports, that actually concludes my reports.
Any other questions? Okay. Public improvement, Chad? That would be page 122. Oh, she says 123. We're close.
Morning.
Hey?
Start off with this month's newsletter. If you guys read the newsletter, our department was highlighted, so shout out to Logan Bailey. We were pleased with that. So, and then also, before I start into the updates, I wanted to just kind of talk about some of the projects and maybe some misunderstandings that I've heard from staff, and I'm sure you guys sitting here have heard too. Occasionally, people approach me and buy different who funded that, or I'm sure you guys know that too. But I just kind of wanted to talk about how some of these projects come to fruition. As you guys know, there's really three aspects to a project. We start off.
Is his speaker on? His mic? It's not picking him up.
Yeah, lean forward.
I don't think it's on.
Right now.
Okay.
There you go. Start over from the beginning.
I wondered why I was.
No, I mean, you're going to have to start over from the beginning.
Terrence.
I was waiting for somebody to say something.
I wasn't looking at it.
Okay, so I wanted to start out this month by giving some kind of information on how some of the projects come to fruition, to alleviate some of the misunderstandings that I've been approached with from staff and even some residents of, why are we doing this or who approved that? As you all know, and for those listening or viewing, these projects start, a year ago. We start with it in three aspects, really, with a conceptual and assessment phase, which is when I'm assessing the needs of some of these projects, also meeting with departments and trying to determine what their needs are. Then it moves into the budgeting and planning phase of it, where we begin putting price tags on some of these things. And then it goes to approval in September of the previous year. And then as the final is the implementation and execution of the projects, which you start to see throughout the following year. So in many cases, these are months and months ahead of time planned and sometimes years planned ahead of time, and you're starting to see the execution of them. So it's not something that we do off the cuff or in a hurry, or these things have been planned out for quite some time. So as you see, and the most visible ones get the most attention, right? We do the carpet here in the courthouse, and everybody sees it, and that becomes pretty visible. Some of the bigger projects outside, you are more, highlighted, and that's where we get some of the feedback from the public. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up and let everybody know that this is not stuff that happens off the cuff, and until we get direction in my department from this body to cease on projects, we continue to move forward with the approved budget of the previous October. So
And what I want, what Chad is saying, I'll say it directly, projects are years in the making. These are capital projects, they're things that we're planning way ahead that are gonna last for many, many years. And, so Chad's got them on the docket, they're happening. And then we have a financial crunch and everyone's saying, well, why are you putting in new carpet? Well, it isn't that Chad decided to put in new carpet last month. It's been planned for literally 2 years. And sometimes it's important to keep these capital projects rolling, because the complex has been here for 40 years, and it's gonna be here for another 40. And you just have to keep things fixed. You can't let stuff break down and go to pieces, because it costs twice as much to fix it if you don't catch it early. Is that right, Chad?
exactly, yes. Okay, so now let's move into the updates. The courthouse common areas, carpet, hallways, and corridors is complete. The only one we couldn't tackle this year is the lower level, a little less visible area, so we decided to put that one off, and hopefully we can capture that next year. The youth facility expansion is beginning to wind down. Everything's on schedule. We're moving into the finishes and paint, flooring. Furniture will be coming. They're installing the security detention hardware and doors. So in the next 30 to 45 days, we'll really start seeing that start wrapping up. So, and it's right on schedule with our projections. So that's good news. The JCI performance improvement is essentially complete. We're still doing some punch list items and some stuff contractually that need to be wrapped up. So that's all but complete. The construction codes renovation also wrapping up. They're installing furniture there today. I know a couple of commissioners walked through it with me over the last month, and kind of checked out the new area. The other departments that will be occupying the west end of that area, their furniture and finishes and such for that end will be coming later this month. The 911 dispatch center renovation, we did some finish upgrades in there. It was dated, and so that was approved last year, and we decided to tackle that. That's also, we're through painting. Flooring will be coming next week, and then they are finishing the CAD stations or the dispatch stations for our staff there, and then that'll be coming at the end of the month as well. So IT has finished their upgrades. They went through and changed all of the cabling in there to update that stuff to newer modern requirements, and so that's moving along. Yeah, other than that, it'll be completed here in the next couple weeks, so that's all I have. If there's any questions.
Probably doing a little bit of painting and finishing over for the judges. We have new judge.
Yeah, that's been a little bit of a challenge. We find out, in a short term, but we've been able to accomplish it, so.
Yeah, those are some that we didn't plan 2 years ahead,
Right, right.
so. Well, different question. Okay. Anything else for capital?
How's the youth facility coming along?
Right on schedule. In the next 30 to 45 days, we'll be wrapping up, so they have put in the finishes are going in, painting is near completion, flooring and furniture we're at that stage of it, so.
When are you gonna break through to connect them?
So that it will be early August. They are gonna move the residential treatment area kids into part of the new expansion on a temporary basis while we can renovate those interior rooms. That's the most challenging part, is we have to have a lot of stuff in place.
Put the students into the new area so that you can get back into where
That's
they
correct.
were previously.
In order to do that, you have to have a lot of state inspections, and, everything has to be operational in order to do that, to shut the other area down on a temporary basis, so.
Okay.
This isn't really to his report, but where are we in terms of the hiring for people there?
Yeah, we've only had 11 applicants so far, and we don't have a large enough pool of folks to schedule like a thorough interview process. So unfortunately, we haven't gotten that good mixture that we would say for experience and education that would be the right fit for the Parks Department.
Youth facility.
Youth facility.
Oh, my goodness.
Start over.
Well, anybody wanted to know?
HR report, Joe.
Yeah, for youth facility, we're still ongoing with it, so we're not posting CBT and day treatment. I talked to Jeremy about it. Even when he onboards for that, he always has them come in as youth specialists and then fields them to the other positions, because he likes having them come in at the top level so then they can be interchangeable as needed in case of emergency. So we have updated that posting and we're playing it by ear, but hasn't been like a groundswell yet, but I'd say give it time. Hopefully I'll have more to report.
Are we gonna be able to utilize the new areas? Do we think we'll have staff enough to start implementing some of the additions that we've been anticipating?
I hope so, yep.
Okay.
Are we getting our applicants for the youth facility, are we getting a lot of just out of school people, or are we trying to get experienced people from other agencies?
That's the difficult piece, is getting people from other agencies. You may get them later in their career if they want to come, but you're generally getting new personnel. Jeremy, obviously, we know, does a great job of going through those and the hiring process. So, but I just talked to him the other night, and he said he received one new application that he was looking at and getting ready to interview, so it wasn't significant. Hopefully in the next month, he'll have more.
Okay. We changed subjects, Chad, I'm sorry.
Can't help you with some of that.
Did you want to answer that, Chad?
I will say, I have had that conversation with Jeremy, and in his frustration, he'll hire somebody and then 2 more will leave, so it's been an uphill battle.
That is true.
Okay, anything else? Any more?
Concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a grant application for voting reimbursement.
So this is for our changes in the early voting. So this is a grant reimbursement from the state. We've already applied for it, but this is a resolution to accept the funding.
Move it.
Support.
Moved by Augustine, supported by DeRoche for grant, for voting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, now we're to that wild bunch of budget amendments.
So for the budget amendments, I guess I'll start top down. So the very first one is the interest revenues that have been increased due to change the treasurer's office. So they have been actively working on interest revenues. So basically, that would just go straight to our fund balance carryover. Sound budgeting says we have to record it. So,
It comes in, you got to put it somewhere, and you have to.
absolutely. The next one is for personnel from the county clerk's office. There was some changes in somebody's health insurance that was, it changed over in January when they did elections and employee elections, and then they, so that has been a cost. And it's a smaller department, so we will need to make an adjustment for that. Similarly, the equalization department had some employee turnover, and so the employee payout costs were not anticipated. So then we have the circuit court changes, and that is actually due to a change in in state reimbursements. So they have increased, the state has said that we're going to increase costs for attorney fees, and they are funding the additional costs. And then the next one is our inmate medical costs. That has experienced a significant increase for this year. Much like our health insurance costs, the inmate health insurance costs have gone up. But we are also having people that before they're booked into the jail, and we can add them to Blue Cross, they are requiring medical care. So we've had quite a bit of expenses from that.
I will note on that too, we did receive a question from all county administrators in relationship to the cost of inmate medical. So it is something that we're working to address at the state level related to the funding, because it's just, it's going up. Sorry, Melissa.
No, thank you.
That, those souls are in our responsibility, and we have to take care of them.
Correct.
Yes, Jeannie?
Aren't they working on something also at the state of Michigan to allow them to go on to Medicaid?
Correct,
Okay,
correct,
which would substantially help us.
yes. They haven't allowed it in the past, so it's been that way. They, take them off Medicaid to put them at the cost of the county. So,
I do not want to do this now, but I'd be curious to see the claims data and what type of self-insured options we have if this was a huge problem. I mean, because I don't know how many
well, we
of the
do
inmates
have,
are actually seeking medical treatment. We pay a contract for I'm assuming the small stuff's getting taken care of by our in-house
yes,
doctor contract that we pay for.
yes.
Keeps
The
going up.
cost of
So,
prescriptions is high, but we do run it through Blue Cross. The sheriff's office had put together a proposal with Blue Cross to add prisoners or inmates to the coverage.
Yeah.
But we can't do that with those that have not been booked. We're not able to do that, so. Again, doing the best that we can.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Resources available.
interesting topic that I can't say I've really heard us talk about before. But
We haven't
that's,
talked about it.
Brian really excited.
I know. I got,
Sure.
I'm like, what? Why are
Wake up, Brian.
Why are we sinking on this one? I'm like, yeah.
Well, there was a push some years ago, you know, to take the inmates and prisoners shouldn't be on federal insurance, well, because it's taxpayer money. So they're gonna push them down onto our county insurance, you know, which, whatever. I mean, it's,
Taxpayer covered.
I'm curious, I mean, you referenced to prior to being booked. I mean, how many people, I mean, I'm trying to think of the circumstance. If the
yeah.
prosecutor seeks a warrant for someone's arrest and the judge issues it, you know,
How many days are they in limbo?
well, I don't understand when the circumstances would be. I mean, if you go to somebody's house and he's got pills, he brings his medicines with him, or he should. The booking process occurs shortly after the arrest. The only time I can think off the top of my head this morning would be if, for instance, someone's in an automobile accident and there's a belief that they were intoxicated, and so there's a warrant issued, but they're in the hospital, as an example. And so the warrant isn't really, they're not booked into the process because they're not available. And I can't, for the life of me, figure out how many people that could possibly be. This becomes such a
More than you think now. Undersheriff's here.
How does that work?
What can happen is an arrest can be made, and we don't accept them into our jail for various reasons until they're medically cleared. Perhaps they've been involved in some type of a serious crash, car crash, or the mechanism of injury for that crash is pretty high, and we want to make sure that they have been examined medically before they're brought to the jail. We certainly don't want them to have a serious medical emergency in the jail because we haven't taken the proper precautions to get them medically cleared.
So we're generally talking about someone that's in the hospital.
They've been taken to the emergency room to be cleared. Sometimes that can even include people who are highly intoxicated, where their BAC is so high or they're acting in such a behavior that it would be a danger to house them in our jail. We have to get them medically cleared before they come to the jail.
Okay. And so that's actually kind of an expensive, now I'm seeing it, that particular segment of people, even though it may be small, they're in a pretty expensive place. All right, Brian?
After that explanation, I'm still trying to understand why we are responsible for that person. I mean, I would think they'd have their own health insurance and everything through the car insurance or what have you, up to that point, and then once they're incarcerated, wouldn't that still be in effect?
What we're dealing with right now that's a big issue is people saying they have medical issues when they don't. So that's the major thing we're dealing with right now. We go arrest someone on a fraud or just a warrant. As soon as we get them in handcuffs, they have a heart issue. So we send them to the hospital, they gotta get cleared at the emergency room, and it's very, very expensive. So I actually just talked to Jerry about this the other day. We're gonna actually start going after some of these people for false medical clearance, so. Yep, 100%.
Absolutely.
The deal is dealing with it, but we deal with that every day. So I can tell you specifically up in Delta, almost daily, we are sending people to the hospital to get cleared. Because as soon as we arrest people, especially people that have a drug addiction, they have issues. So we have to go to Sparrow to get them cleared. So it's a big deal. And yep, and we have a couple really good cases right now that we're moving through, and our deputies are actually starting to look for this. So it's a big deal. And then the same thing the undersheriff said. So.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, because I was with Joe, I didn't understand it, but now I certainly do. The word is on the street, you get arrested, claim something.
Well,
Now it's on record.
Oh, I'm sorry.
and we're actually a little different.
They all know it.
A lot of agencies, as soon as if we arrest you for, let's say, a fraud, you're like, well, I have a heart condition. A lot of agencies won't even take you. So a lot of frequent flyers, as we call them, they play that game all around the state, and a lot of PDs just kick them. So they just advise them of their warrant, or they just seek charges and they let them go. Most of the time, we don't do that here.
So you're paying to send these people to the hospital to get them cleared, even though, like in your example, for fraud, the likelihood of them actually being incarcerated is slim. Most fraud type offenses are able to post bond.
Most of them.
Right.
But a lot of the times when we're talking about fraud, there's a lot more going on there. It's not just a fraud.
Well, but what I'm saying though is that, you know, the whole booking process, you book them in, then they're arraigned within a short period of time after that, and then the judge sets or doesn't set a bond. I would think that a lot of those people that you're paying for up front before you book them, the way you're telling us, are people who are ultimately going to be out on bond anyway.
Correct.
So we're incurring costs for people who aren't incarcerated and aren't likely to be incarcerated.
Correct, whether it's an original charge or warrant. So if we weren't gonna take them that day, we're still gonna send a warrant request through, they're gonna have a warrant, we're gonna have to go deal with them at some point. So at some point, the PD is gonna have to grab onto these people and bring them before the court.
Well, that's it's been referenced by a couple of people that don't understand why we would be responsible for that. And that, I would agree with that. I mean, you're talking about, I don't know what the percentage would be, but I think it would be sizable of people who aren't going to see the inside of a jail cell except for the brief period of time in which they are booked and before they get to see a judge.
That's fair, yeah.
Thank you.
I'll put a bow on it by saying I think this would be a great use of Medicaid dollars. That's it.
Okay.
At least the reimbursement rate, Brian.
Okay, now we're to veterans burials. We're moving down the list here, Melissa.
Yep. So now we have the veterans burials. We've had higher rates that we've needed to pay to these more people that we've had to pay for. We had the same thing last year. And then the last piece for the general fund is a transfer out to our health insurance fund to help stabilize the insurance fund.
So those big negatives you've been talking about, we have to do something about it.
I would like to. It's not required, but I would feel more comfortable
Well,
having that, requesting it.
And our insurance is on a calendar year, and we're halfway through, and we don't foresee that it's going to get any better. Is that?
Our insurance is on a calendar year, but our actual budget is on a fiscal year, and right now, we cannot end the fiscal year on a deficit, so.
Okay.
So then the next budget amendment is special revenue funds, and that is for our Parks Department. There was a request from Public Works and Planning for the replacement of stairs for up to $100,000. And then our housing fund, Claudine has had more projects, more expenses, but there was revenue from the prior year, so that needed to be spent for this current fiscal year. Otherwise, it would have to be sent back to the federal government. The next one is a vehicle that was purchased for construction code. They hired another individual, so they needed a new vehicle for that individual to use. And then we had quite a significant amount of opioid settlements that had not been budgeted for previously. So those settlement dollars came in and we were able to account for those.
So those are dollars coming in, and then we're just moving over to the fund.
Exactly. We are going to save the money until we have a determination on what our way forward is.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Melissa, the car for the construction codes department?
Yes.
We didn't, remind me, I'm trying to think, we didn't add an FTE to that department, did we?
No, we just filled an FTE that had been vacant for quite a long time.
So we didn't have a car waiting for them? I'm just.
We had one vehicle, but it needed to be replaced.
Oh, just the timing just so happened.
Yes.
It wasn't that come to Eaton County and get a new car. It was.
No,
That's
no.
okay. Right, yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. If we have any other departments, does Parks need a new car?
Been there a year and a half, still waiting.
Thank you.
No, the vehicle that had been assigned for that employee or that FTE was not particularly usable. So, and then we have our donations fund from the youth facility. We have to budget this fund. We don't know exactly how much we are going to bring in revenue, though, because it is donation basis. So they had additional revenues, but we also had additional expenses that were not covered by child care fund. And then similarly, we are required to budget for the sheriff donation fund. They brought in more revenue for the victim advocate services and also had more expenses. And then, no. The last budget amendment is the drain debt, and that is simply increased revenue associated with people paying off their special assessments as they go to sell their home. So,
I'll move the amendments.
Moved by Augustine, supported by DeRosa. Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Ready?
Make your statement.
Yeah, next is the, before miscellaneous, we have the committee appointments that this body is responsible for. In July, under the board rules, we're supposed to present what vacancies will be before the end of the year. So those highlighted are the vacancies that this board will have to appoint, and we will contact the individuals that are on currently and see if they want to be reappointed. And then we'll also address, if they don't, any applicants.
Yes, go ahead, Brian.
This isn't a replacement, but under Eaton County Land Bank Authority, Brian Merkel, didn't he leave the city? So is he still on this board?
I'm looking at Claudine, he's still on it. Is he still? Yeah, okay.
Well, wouldn't that,
Was it-
wouldn't
it's
that
a-
be highlighted also then?
Is it a vacancy then? It can be, yeah. I was never notified. Yeah,
I thought he wasn't even in the area anymore, but.
okay. We'll contact the treasurer and ask him about that.
All right, thank you.
They don't meet very often, I don't think, if ever.
They do, once a month. That's not ever.
Yeah, and this feels like we never meet, too.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Any questions about that? We'll move on. Thanks for the input there.
No miscellaneous. And then the bills.
Move the bills.
DeRosa, Rogers, no, Brailer, Rogers, moving the bills. Questions, comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, now we're gonna go talk about budget, and we'll take a break first. That's all right? Welcome back. Now it's an opportunity, it's time to discuss the 24-25 upcoming budget. We'll start with you, Connie. Where we at?
Well, okay, I'll take it. I'm gonna make Melissa do it, but okay. Nobody heard that in the public, so. Okay, so from the beginning of the fiscal year, we have obviously made cuts, or the beginning of our process, we have obviously made cuts. So the total changes, the difference between revenue and expenditures today in our projections are 3.7 million. And Melissa, please correct me if anything I say is incorrect.
That was 4.2 last time I looked.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So we've made some changes. The changes that were made that Melissa looked at, is that on this page? Which one?
Are you wanting year-to-date?
Oh, right there,
change?
sorry. The total changes, so personnel changes from the prior month, what that means, and Melissa separated these out, are just changes from employees that have left and new employees that have started. We did recognize the increase that the prosecutor will receive from the state, so you see an offset of $250,000 on both revenues and expenditures. The union contract settlements and general union pay, non-union pay increases, I'll come back to that, is an increase. We did move a jail lieutenant from the general fund to the jail millage fund, working on projections that we have that would carry us through the 2026 expiration of that millage. We removed an EMT. These are one-time, I just want to make a note. These are things that we could do one time based on where fund balances are today. We removed an EMT that serves for the inmates to the commissary fund, which is an allowable expense. We eliminated the contingency expense that we usually set aside in case there's anything that comes up, which you saw that Melissa did budget amendments, eliminating contingency for this fiscal year. Changes insignificant to some vehicle leasing. We eliminated the transfer to the child care fund completely. So we will use the fund balance that is in Fund 292 that normally we would reduce at the end of this fiscal year, but we want to reduce it for next fiscal year because we can recognize that savings. Going up to the increased state revenue sharing, if you hadn't heard, the state did pass their budget with an increase to all counties, and that results in approximately $308,000. So back to the cost of union settlements and the general non-union employees. What administration is recommending is a 5% pay increase for all non-union employees, and then we added in approximately a similar amount to the way that we've settled contracts with the other unions into that. So that totals $632,000 as an increase to the projections that we've had prior. Are there any questions on that? Okay, yes?
I do have a question.
Yep.
Back to the jail,
Yeah.
jail lieutenant.
Yep.
So when you say that's a one-time, are you still projecting that, I mean, because we've been moving people off from the jail millage.
Correct.
Probably why when I looked up with my eyebrows, you looked at it, but, so can you just explain the thought process behind that, are we still?
We would be on target, we would be on target with the jail millage to pay off the remaining debt and to move all of those employees back in. What this does, when I say it's a one-time attempt to balance the budget, obviously you can't continue to do that every year. And we still have to move those back in for the next fiscal year, 25-26, so that we're, spending down that, the debt and the expenses that can no longer be charged to the jail millage after 2026. But rather than to keep that money in there and project out that we could have expenses carry in there through 27, 28. We wanted to make sure that we were recognizing it this year based on our budget issues.
So we're kind of, in that sense, and I think in a couple of other senses in here, we're sort of borrowing from the future to a certain degree.
Yes.
I mean, to be able to.
Everything that we have done is borrowing from the future with respect to any progress we've made on expenses or revenues other than you see the increase in the revenue sharing.
Yeah, we were projecting a surplus in that 2 years from now, so we're gonna take some of it at this point.
Yeah,
So
so,
we are projecting a surplus then, that's what you're
well,
saying?
for this fiscal year.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if it's so much borrowing from the future as just staying in place. I mean, right now, the budget projections for 24, 25, we're close. The real problem is 24, 25, 26, that's yet to be determined.
So profound.
So at this point, I mean, I think what we're basically hearing is that by moving some money around and making this particular adjustment with the lieutenant, that's not sustainable, but frankly, 25, 26, unless there's some change, isn't gonna be sustainable in the big picture entirely. So, I mean, I understand what they're trying to do, and it's not something we would normally want to do, but we're trying to cover 24, 25, and then a lot of decisions are gonna have to be made, potentially.
Yeah, it's, hard decisions may have to be made in the future. But to make them now is premature. I mean, that's what we're getting at here.
Well, this board has, for the last year, has consistently made a decision, whether we've verbalized it or not, that we are going to continue to operate as per usual. That's why we've gone into negotiations with the unions. That's why we've done some of the other things that we've done, which would fly in the face of what we're saying about our potential economic situation. But I think it goes to that, to your point, Blake, is that we're not making those potentially catastrophic decisions now when we don't know what the situation's going to be for the 25, 26 budget. That's the real crunch.
Well, and I guess the part of my concern, I mean, I understand, and I'm not saying that I disagree with the thought process behind this, but, you know, we talked about leading up to this, how we were going to have to, how people were going to see as part of our budgeting process for the next fiscal year where things might eventually go towards. And I feel like similar to past years where we've had projected budget deficits and, you know, very worried about where we're headed, and then at the end of the year, we're able to kind of reconcile things by moving things around. I feel, I don't want that. I don't know if we're being honest about where we're gonna go. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily where we have to do that in the budgeting process, I understand. But I think we need to be honest with ourselves that after November, if the millage increase fails, there's going to be some major adjustments that will have to be made to the budget at that point in time.
Right.
Correct.
But then honestly, we have to have a balanced budget that we're sitting on right now. And the only way we're gonna be to do that is one of two ways: eat up our entire fund balance, or do some of the things that Melissa has done here, which we all know are one-timers. I mean, you can't take away your contingency.
Right, well, there is a third way. I mean, that is to cut. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
which is what we talked about. So
Yeah,
that's all I'm
the-
saying
The
is.
third way is the unthinkable. The new-
Well, but it's gonna be the thinkable if we don't get an increase in
It is.
November, so, yeah.
But if we cut now, so administration, as we've been sitting around talking, to cut now would be to tell the public that this is what we're doing. But right now, this board has said that we want the public, the residents, to say what services they want. So we had an executive team meeting last week, I think it was. We'll have another one next week. I need to send out a notice to talk about these things. But we talked to the offices about the fact that there could be changes that we would have to make. If that, something does not happen in November to increase our revenues, we're going to have to look at services. There's no question about that. And whether we do that, whether we carry through the 24-25 budget as we adopt it, or we start making cuts after November, that's something the board would have to determine. But the longer you wait to make those cuts, if the public says they don't want to increase revenue, the more harm and the more cuts we will have to make for 25-26. That's what you're looking at. Does that make sense? Okay.
Brian?
I would say, based on the discussions we've had this week with people at the fair, this is exactly the right thing we should be doing right now, is adjusting things so we can get through this and let them know we are fiscally responsible. I mean, we're not saying, yeah, we got X amount of dollars here, but we're not going to put them here to make us look bad. That'll make us look bad. So, but we're adjusting things to get through what we got to do. This is what we're responsible for. So I think this is the right thing to do right now. And then when we come election time, whatever happens, happens, and we go from there.
So the one thing I would note on the page that you're looking at right now that says revenue increases or expense decreases in order to adopt the budget. So we need $3.4 million. We can use that in terms of our fund balance, which is a risky option. We can look at some other funds. We obviously can't go out and borrow for our operating expenses. But what this tells me, when we sat and we looked at this, what this says is that that $3.4 million that you're looking at is the ARPA funds that have been used to balance this budget. So that 3.4, if we still had that funding, we would balance our budget. Because we don't, we're looking at 3.4 in either cuts or some other revenue use that is not sustainable, right? Cuts are the only things that would be sustainable. So going forward, 25, 26, you're gonna be looking at double that plus increased cost and expenditures if revenues from every source do not grow. And from the report that Melissa provided to you, you can see that charges for services are down. We have other costs that are down. So you're not going to grow your revenue to deal with this situation, which is, again, why you took that to the voters. So next, or the 26th, Chairman Mulder has called another budget meeting so that we can make sure that we're addressing everything before we get to August, which is when you would then send that to the public for the public hearing, and making sure that we have everything ready to go there, which then in September, you'd have one more Ways and Means to make changes, and then you would adopt the budget. I believe it's the 18th. So the next meeting, what I envision, if this committee is okay with that, us to come in and present what our final recommendation with the numbers that we have now. Now, we'll make adjustments in terms of staffing and changes there, or any other information that we receive. And that departments would be present, offices would be present to talk to you about what this means in 25, 26, as we've talked, to their departments. We want to make sure that you, the public, know what cuts would look like. So you have the option to make cuts to the budget in terms of a percentage that would spread across each office. You can make a cut to any non-mandated service. It depends on how you want to spread those cuts. So we're not to that point yet, obviously, but they need to tell you what the impact is to their office. So as we always pick on the sheriff's office, and I hate to do that, but road patrol, we know that is a service we won't be able to provide to Elk County. We also have a Delta Township contract that we will have to look at because we wouldn't have police services in-house. So there's a lot that goes into that dollar amount that we would be looking at, and I think, Melissa, the savings ended up being, with both of those to county general fund, in terms of just road patrol, was,
Approximately 5 million.
so it's not as much as you think those cuts would be. You still have to operate a jail. We're spending down that jail millage money. So that's what you're looking at. Now you're gonna then have to look at all of your other offices and tell them what services you don't want them to do. They're gonna come back to you and they're gonna say, we have to do that. So that's when you're gonna get into those difficult discussions. For 25, 26, essentially.
The next time we meet, we go over all the details of the budget. I do want to hear from the departments. What I don't think we're necessarily served, and I don't know that the public's necessarily served if the departments all come in and say, by the way, if things don't work out in November for the 25, 26 budget, we're gonna have to do X. I think it's a better explanation. We've made this decision that we're going to continue to go forward as business, because maybe the cuts now, when we aren't right there, would be to I think, inflict serious harm on the county's ability going forward. But I do think it's important that as we look at the final figures for 24, 25, that the departments come in here and tell us what we're deferring, what we're not able to do in 24, 25, how that has affected them, whether that's additional personnel, whether that's expanded IT, whatever those things are. There are certain things which we simply aren't going to be able to address in 24, 25 that are serious. And that's what I think ought to be out there. Yes, every year we've moved money around, we've made things work, but it's always been at the expense of investments, whether it's in people or infrastructure or whatever it is, that we've deferred. And I think we all know, I think everybody understands the fact that we're going to the voters with the proposition that we're going. I think the public understands that there's a cliff there. They may not understand exactly when the cliff is going to hit us in the face. But I do, well, that's what I'm interested in hearing from the department heads is, all right, yeah, we can make this work, we can do this, we will do this, we'll do the best we can. But here's what we're not getting to that we probably should be getting to if we had the resources. And at least that way, I think that's the narrative that needs to go out there as to how we're handling this. November is going to be, we'll know either there's going to be additional revenues available, and then this board will have about 6 weeks, how much we can really affect what they do with that, I think is going to be relatively minimal. Or if there aren't going to be additional revenues becoming available, the same 6 weeks. And then we're done, this board is done, a new board will come in. There's only going to be so much that we can do in terms of addressing the clear problem for 25, 26 in that 6-week period. And there may be some things that we can do, or some policies that we could potentially implement, but the reality in terms of how they affect 24, 25, it seems to me, is going to be the back end of that budget. And so whatever we do in that regard to the 24, 25 budget is something the next board could very well come back and say, no, we don't want to do that.
That next board is going to have to make those budget amendments for this budget that we're doing right now. I mean,
That's what I'm saying.
Well, that was gonna be one of my questions, is that where we're headed? Because, any new board can change any budget that's been set, but that doesn't stop us from setting that budget the way that we feel is adequate. So that in-between period, the lame duck period in between after elections, that would be kind of my question and concern, and maybe it's too early to start talking about that, but, the earlier if the worst case scenario comes and the additional revenues aren't approved, then, oh boy. No, I didn't do that. Looks like it's still on that TV, so. Anyways, the sooner we make those adjustments, the better it is for the county from a long-term perspective, I guess is what I'm getting at.
That's the point that I was making, yes. The sooner that you do that, the better off you're going to be because you can address it earlier rather than saying, okay, now we're going to have to cut 10 million.
Right.
We're going to cut 5, we're going to have to cut 10. You just want to try to present that in the easiest format.
Maybe we're talking past each other. The thought to me is if things don't go well in November, that we're gonna cut, for an example, 5 million out of the 24-25 budget, I don't think that's what we're talking about.
Well, that's not, not the full 5 million, but my point is the further along that you go with the budget that's not sustainable, the bigger the hole is that you've got to fill.
Well, but my point, Terrence, is the 24-25 budget is going to be sustainable. I mean, the changes that they're making, like the lieutenant on the millage money, that's going to change for 25-26. All those things are going to change substantially if there isn't an increase in revenue.
Right.
But in terms of us, if things go poorly in November, I don't think that, on the Ways and Means meeting in November, we come with immediate cuts. 24-25 should be sustainable.
Well, it's sustainable if we use up $3.5 million of our fund balance. That's my point. That money's not there for future years, so.
Well, that's true, but the reality is if we don't have additional revenues, it doesn't matter. Because the types of cuts that are going to have to be implemented go way past that fund balance of $3 million, way past. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't think we have a drop dead date of December or whatever, our board meeting, to make immediate cuts of whatever that amount might be. Those cuts, in my view, should be implemented or some of the reductions should be implemented over the 24-25 year, but gradually. There isn't a point where on April 1st, 150 people are no longer employed.
Essentially, that's what we're saying. I mean, the board, whether it's this one or another one, would have to make those decisions. What I'm saying from departments is they're going to know that those decisions would have to be made. They should be able to tell this board and the public that are going out to consider a question that any cuts to our office, we're already losing what Commissioner Brayler said by not enhancing anything that we're doing or spending money that we should on infrastructure or staff. But we're going to be impacted if you have to cut in any significant way. And I mean, I'll look right now, you've got the sheriff's department, you have the court, you have facilities, you have technology. The court's a large part of the county's budget. Sheriff's department is as well. Technology is, and so is facilities. So they're going to look at a cut. And I want them to tell you what that means to them. Because it is going to be rough on services to the public.
Yeah, I understand, but this sounds like what we're gonna do is we're gonna have essentially a meeting where they're gonna tell us what the cuts are. Those are
No.
decisions we don't have to make at this point in time.
They're not going to say what the cuts are. They're just going to say essentially what any cut that you make to our operations will impact us. They're not going to have a dollar amount to cut because we don't have that right now. Unless you looked at the 3.4 million and just used that.
I think it's more relevant for them to tell us what we're deferring this next budget year, how it's impacting this next budget year. The reality of everybody coming up here and saying, things go poorly in November, oh my goodness, this is what I envision. Because otherwise, I mean, it's a general conversation. So if they're gonna come up here and tell us, if in fact there isn't an increase in revenue for the county, this is the impact it's going to have on them. They are in a more specific way saying, this is where we can cut. This is where we're gonna have to cut. And we're in a conversation that I don't think, frankly, is beneficial necessarily. If we're dealing right now with 24, 25. And there are things that are going to be and have been deferred because of our financial situation. But we always saw the projections that the real crunch wasn't going to occur until 25, 26. And to start talking about if we don't have additional revenue, how that's going to affect us in 25, 26 and beyond, you can have that conversation if you want. I don't think it's particularly helpful.
And maybe we're saying the same thing, or different things. In terms of what impact it would have to an office is what their services are. So if they tell you these are all of the services we provide, and one thing, or two things, or three things, depending on the dollar amount you ask them to cut, are impacted, at least the public and because some people honestly do not know what these offices do. It gives the opportunity for them to actually say, these are all the services that you're getting as a board and that the public is getting. So that was the intent of that. They're going to tell you that deferring everything is harming them. It's harming them, but it's harming the county as a whole.
Yeah.
So that's really what I'm saying. I don't want them to identify anything, because why would they want to give that up right now? Why would they want to tell you we can do without this? I don't want them to go in that direction.
It's not a question of we can do without anything.
Right.
I mean, there are services which, frankly, we provide to the public that we're just simply not going to be able to provide. Those are all valuable services. So it's not a question of if you ask me to, I can do away with this because it's really not necessary. That's never going to be the conversation.
Shouldn't be.
Well, so when are we meeting next? Are we meeting
26th,
the
Friday the
26th?
26th. No, the following Friday. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Holmes?
I would think if they came in as departments, I would see it, if they mentioned any part of their services, it would be informative to me to know the priority of the least harm, should we say, the least amount of reduced services, for us to have that information. Not that they're saying cut these or not, obviously, they wouldn't want to, but when it comes time, for us, we know the priority, that they understand the least harm to public service. So to me, that'd be somewhat beneficial to hear from them. But
Yeah, to Commissioner Brailer's point, that is going to then create, number one, panic within the departments as to you don't prioritize this service. So telling you and the public in general what they do it's telling you these services could go away. But if you say, we're going to do away with this, or they're giving that an option as their first priority to go, then that's what you're telling those employees. We don't want to lose employees. We want employees to know we're doing everything we can to keep the services, and we want the public to know that that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, that's I guess my concern is that is that kind of discussion almost invariably will then start to develop the 25, 26. You're looking at what the 25, 26 budget should look like. And, I just don't think that that's helpful at the moment. I think it's just as important, if not more so, that the public, and I understand the public doesn't understand everything that we do, and I don't have any problem with here's the services that we provide. But what we're saying is that we've managed the money as well as we could manage the money. We've been responsible throughout, and we have continued to provide those services, whether they're mandated or not mandated, whether they're funded or not funded by the state, that are mandated, to the best that we can. Here's what we haven't been able to do, and here's what we're not going to be able to do in 24, 25 because of the financial situation we have. It's going to be a lot worse in 25 and 26, but I don't think it is particularly helpful at this point in time for us to say, here's what's going to happen in 25, 26 specifically. So at any rate, it's just my feeling about it.
Well, yeah, to prioritize at this point is not a good thing.
No, we're not asking for that.
I would not want that.
But they will be thinking about that because they're responsible individuals, right? But I don't want them to share that information with you because, again, that would create potentially an exodus of valuable employees that we don't know it's an issue yet.
Well,
We won't know that.
part of the problem is that we're not gonna really know. I mean, you've got some, the jail's a perfect example. Sheriff has to run the jail, right? So we know that that's there. We've got some programs that, some of it is mandated services, but it's not mandated services as well. There's a mixture. And so how you're going to unravel, I know we looked at that back in 2008 and 9, and I was surprised at the time and a little concerned is that it wasn't so cut and dried. This particular service wasn't wasn't mandated, so this service could go. They were interlocked. And so you had, you had part of it was mandated, part of it wasn't mandated. How does that affect your personnel? I mean, there's a lot of things. If there is not additional revenue, there's a lot of different things that are going to have to go through. It's something that's not going to be done in 6 weeks because you've got that interlocking. So, I mean, it's going to be incredibly complex and it's not going to be easy. It's not going to simply be, all right, we take X number of the employees that are here with the least seniority and we send them home. We're not going to be able to do that. All right, because some of those people are probably doing mandated or services we're going to have to continue in some fashion. So,
Commissioner Brailer, you and I went through that actual experience, and we did that work. And it was not cut and dry in any way, and we remember how it went, and it wasn't fun, and it wasn't pretty, and there was no easy way to do it, and you're absolutely right, that to pull that out and try to reenact that at this point would be more harmful than good.
you're going to have a full year to try and figure out how to get there.
Commissioner Mott, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to touch on the point that Joe was talking about. I mean, obviously, we can't know what's going to be cut, and we can't make, promises that this is going to happen. But however, we do have a pretty good idea of things that we'll have to cut. So, I mean, I'm being accused of using scare tactics for everything, that I'm explaining to the public. I mean, you've got to explain to the public some of the things that might happen. And I know it's going to sound like a scare tactic. It's going to sound bad. But if we don't inform the public about what's happening or what could happen, then the public could come back and say, why didn't you say so? Why didn't you say this was I was not going to have this service? Because that's on us. So I think we just have to explain to what's going on. And these are some things that might be cut. I can't say they are going to be cut. I don't say that. But that's just a message that has to get out there, because I know some people up in Isabella, they weren't aware of some of the things that are being cut that they want. So I don't want that to happen here, but you're going to have opposition, and I got some people in my district that are opposed to it, and so they're going to do whatever they can to try to persuade people not to vote for it. So.
Commissioner DeRocha?
There's some of the questions that have come to us this week is reflecting on what Joe said. What will you cut? Well, I've been trying to tell people you're not going to see an immediate cut in services. You're going to see a reduction over time, because as we lose revenue, can't replace things. Just like the list of vacant positions that we have. You won't see them filled. That's the first place we're gonna start, is not acting on this, because we can't afford to. It's not gonna be a sudden thing. You may not see a change in the first 6 months of the next fiscal year. Don't know. But the reality is by not addressing these things and not replacing these people, you will eventually see a dramatic change in the county. And one of the questions that came was, and it's reflective of the road commission, they're working 4 days a week. Well, why can't the county go? Well, that's fine, unless you want to be there that day that they're closed. You're gonna see a change. We can't predict that. We apportion funds to some departments. We're still gonna apportion funds, they're gonna have less to work with. Where are they gonna change? I have no idea. That's up to them. It's just the way it is. We can't predict that.
You reminded me, probably the very first thing that would happen was what we did today when we recommended positions. We probably would freeze positions. That, you know what? I bet you that'd be the very first thing that we would do.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at a youth facility we
That
have
doesn't
to
affect
staff.
anybody right off, but.
We're looking at a youth facility we're gonna have to staff. How do we staff that with no money to staff it? Well, we don't. So now we've got a building that we can't utilize, even though we could get funding from other communities. If we utilize it, we just don't have the people to put in there. That's not a threat to anybody, that's reality. So, I mean, it's not easy. I wish Jim would come down, but yeah, some of the discussions we've had is, we're not making people happy, I know that.
So what is our feeling? We haven't really parsed out what we want to do in 2 weeks, what we want to say. Where are we going to go with the next meeting? I think, are we comfortable saying that we're willing to enact the budget that we're coming to, for this budget here that we're involved in with these continuation budget? I mean, that's what I'm seeing here. What are we gonna do for the future? That's the discussions we might be talking about in 2 weeks. Is anybody serious about trying to make the budget cuts right now to try to not do some of these adjustments that Melissa has recommended? Yeah.
If I can, because I mean, I started this dialogue a little bit. That's not my suggestion. I'm not suggesting that. My suggestion, or my thought process is that a couple of things. It's not just, and I completely disagree with what Brian just said. It is not going to happen over time. Some things will happen over time. There's going to be some things in 25 that are going to be major changes. I mean, what we've talked about already. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that Connie has discussed, but they're going to happen. They'll have to happen as soon as possible, because you can't, it's so irresponsible to continue to dig that hole. And my fear and my problem, and maybe this is me and my institutionalist point of view, because I've been here for so long and I'm leaving at the end of this year, I don't want to kick the can down to the next board who's gonna be, half of the board is gonna be new members potentially. And then they're gonna have to make a decision. And in my mind, it's almost like we've left them something that, yeah, our budget is balanced. It's balanced by using $3.5 million of our fund balance. And again, I understand why we're doing that now. But what we can't do is, if this fails in November, I don't think we can continue to kick that can. I think that this board has to do some real hard work before we're done at the end of the year in December. Otherwise, you're gonna have a whole bunch of new board members that are gonna have to start making some real tough decisions, and we've left them with, at least from the budget standpoint, not much left in the kitty. So it's not going to happen over time. It's going to be significant. And so my concern is, yes, normally I would agree with you, Joe, but my concern is that we're in the middle of an election cycle. We've got a new board that's going to be taken over. We know how many of us are leaving here. Not that we're geniuses and we know everything, but we know a lot. We all know where we were the first year that we started here. And we're going to have a lot of people in that position. And so we have to be prudent this year, but I think we have to also, it's almost like we maybe have to have a couple of budgets side by side.
Well,
I'm not asking you to do that work, but having the conversations and understanding where we could go, I think, to Jim's point, is very important, because, telling people that, oh, this is going to trickle over time and this and that, well, that's not going to give them a sense of urgency to come out and support this. And that concerns me that we're telling people that, because that's not the reality. Look at the forecast. It's not 10 years down the road. It's next year and it's the year after. So.
You know, and I've been sort of thinking, you know, talking about the alternate budget, you know, this, that we need to be talking about here. Now, I don't know how we do that is in this committee. It's a difficult thing to do, but, you know, if the middle of November and the middle of December, we got to start making those hard decisions, I'm not opposed to it, you know, but we'd have to have some sort of guidelines in our own mind where we're going to go, you know?
And that's kind of my point, is that we have to start planning for it. We have to plan the contingency for it. And, you know, the more work that we can do to lay the groundwork, of course, any future board can change, they can adjust the budget in January if they want to. But I think that it's responsible for us to start down that track as much as we can to help set it going forward so that we're not leaving the next board with an even bigger hole. And Joe's point about about it not being cut and dry, what's mandated and not mandated, I mean, that is exactly what I'm talking about. If we've got to go through that process again, it sounds like it's a pretty long and arduous process, so we need to make sure we're not waiting. The longer we wait, the bigger the hole gets. So that's all I'm saying, is that we still have to do the work to be prepared to make the cuts next year and into the future, is all I'm saying.
And we better be really, we can't be Pollyanna on this budget here, even though we have essentially a balanced budget in front of us. There's nothing pretty about this. You know, you're right, Terrence. I mean, a lot of things are gonna be decided in November.
Well, that's why I keep saying what we should be, we get from the department heads is what we're deferring off for this year. Why is it not pretty? I mean, why is it really, in truth, not simply just business as usual? We're holding as much as we can, and we know that we're losing some things we should be doing, and so that they understand that we're trying to maintain as long as we can the services that we have, but the cliff is coming. Here's what we aren't going to be able to address this year. Here's how this affects us next year. And go from that standpoint. So then it's not really, is to Jim's point where it's not scare tactics, it's just the reality. Here's what we got, here's what we can provide, and here's what we aren't providing, in that context. And that gap just will continue to grow. So.
Commissioner DeRosa?
Yeah, the irony of Terrence's statement was that 2 months ago, I was talking about we need to sit down and work out a Plan B. That's what I titled it. And I was told by many people we can't do that because if we have a Plan B, we'll never sell this to the public. Because if we got a plan lined up, an alternative plan, let's just start with the alternative plan and not worry about increased revenue. Here we are today talking about basically Plan B. What are we going to do? We don't know what we're going to do. The reality is we don't know
That's
because
the choice, Brian.
because
Plan A and Plan B are the choices.
because we don't know what the department heads are thinking. I agree with Joe. Give us an estimate of what we're looking at. We've got some services that we may decide not to cut at the expense of others. We don't know. We're not operating those departments. Road Commission, what are we going to tell them to stop doing? We don't know. We apportion funds to them. Sheriff's Department, we apportion funds to them. We don't determine what they do. We know there's cuts coming. Some of these will indeed be gradual because we have a halfway decent budget for the next fiscal year. But at the end of that, Joe's cliff, if we don't have increased revenue, but we will lead up to that in that fiscal year and say, the next coming months, this service won't be available any longer. That's the way it is. You run a restaurant. You find out that you only have half the revenue that you had last year. What are you going to do? Immediately shut the doors? No, you're going to operate as you can and make it work. Jim, a farmer. I grew up on a farm. You don't know what your revenue is going to be at the end of the year. So you don't plan for that cliff, but you understand it could come. So what do I do in the meantime? I operate as I can on the revenue I have. And that's where we're at right now today. It's not going to last long. We know that. But I think getting an idea from department heads as to what do they see that is not utilized well in the county, can we reduce there first? And then see where we go from there with what money we have available.
Well, any other thoughts?
All you want.
I guess I'll say in closing, 'cause I unfortunately do have to get going. The timing of this discussion, to me, it feels like what's got to happen. Whether it's this next budget season or an emergency work post-November, that's the real argument in my head. I'm leaning towards, okay, it's got to, sure, I don't, from a PR standpoint of pushing this or pushing forward the urgency, I think that can be done without real dirty specifics. The argument that I'm hearing is the timing of this.
Right.
You know, whether we just continue services as has been said, or we do the hard work in November through January to set it up. What happens 2 weeks from now, I guess, is I feel like we're missing each other on that. You know, whether we want to make the discussion that could happen in November, December, does that need to happen 2 weeks from now? I guess that's the chair putting together the meeting. I guess that's up
what
to
I'm,
you.
you know,
But
I can sit with Melissa, I sit with Melissa and we talk about what could happen, and we have a list of things, you know, we know exactly, I don't need the department heads to tell me what could happen, because we already know what can happen, and we've looked at the numbers, and we're saying, you know, if we don't get a millage on January 1, this is what what we have to do, and we're not talking about November that following year, or that next budget cycle, we are talking January 1. And that's, so everybody's aware of that. And we're putting together a budget here, but budgets can be amended and adjusted. And we already have some ideas, and they're not pretty. And I think it's, whether we want to state that 2 weeks from now and have each department head, I don't know if that's gonna put an icing on it or what. I don't know. I am in favor of doing this continuation budget as presented and working from there. And I still think it's imperative that we commissioners get out there and talk about this upcoming millage and how critical it is. And use all the scare tactics you want, because it is scary. And it's not gonna be a pretty thing. We're gonna pass the millage. We're gonna talk about it to our constituents. We're gonna go out there and we're gonna lobby for it. We're gonna make this happen. And each of us is gonna be involved in that, because we don't wanna leave the next commission with those almost impossible decisions. I think we're all in agreement with that. So at this point, we'll leave that date open, and we'll have discussions with staff, the chairman and I, and we'll figure out what the next meeting will look like. If we need department heads to be engaged, we'll talk about that. Is that good with all of you? Because I'm happy to adjourn this meeting at this point without having a plan for the 26th. Yeah. Jim? Okay. Anything else, Connie?
Limited public comment.
That's right.
Just don't forget that.
I can't forget limited public comment. Your opportunity. Thank you, and we'll see you next Wednesday.